Back to the morning show, and joining us in studio this morning, congressional candidate in CD1 here for the House of Representatives, Republican, running here in the June primary, Michelle Garcia Holmes joining us this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me today.
Thanks for joining us here. Good to meet you here. I know this is kind of an introductory thing because it's new for everybody.
Right.
Now that, I've been in New Mexico, I've been in Roswell since 2000, staunch, in CD2 here for all that time, and whatever your thoughts are, love, hate, whatever about the redistricting, that's what's happened here.
Right,
and so
right.
Roswell has been just kind of split at the seams here with really, we have all three congressional districts in Chaves County, and CD1 now covers most of Roswell now. That's where we were all two. I think two just covers a very small section where one is. So more than likely, if you live in Roswell, you're probably under CD1 now.
Yeah, Yvette Harrell has had this district for a very long time, and she still has part of Roswell.
Oh, yeah.
District 1 has carried into the north side of Roswell, and kind of on Main and Garden, and I think it's called Bendo. That area is now in CD1. And so that's what I'm doing here today. I want the listeners to get to know me,
Sure.
learn about me, know why I'm running for Congress, and know that I'll be representing their district well.
And this is, well, and I know, and I'm sure as you've been meeting folks here in the town and things like that, not a lot of people aren't very happy with this redistricting here. And
Right.
And I think, well, I guess your solution would be that if you want the conservative values, then you need to vote conservative here. And I think CD1 will be fine. And, we just vote conservative. I'm sure that's the way you would agree with that statement.
I always tell people
Yeah.
elections have consequences.
Sure.
And I think, if you take a look at our past elections, the 90 years of Democrat-dominated control in our state legislature,
Sure.
You see the results of the consequences of that type of vote. I mean, we're 51st in education, right? If you count Washington, D.C. We're at the bottom of the list of all the good things. Our kids aren't graduating. Education is a huge problem here. Crime, I have the Bernalillo County area.
Yeah.
That is a catalyst of crime. We have border issues. The border issues overflow into District 1, and now we're very close with Roswell, right? So, there's going to be a lot of issues that I would enjoy working on with Yvette Harrell. I am sure she's going to get reelected.
Sure.
But now we're going to have several Congress people
Sure.
representing our conservative values.
Well, and I'm curious, because obviously, as a conservative here fighting, for election, various things in Bernalillo County, that area, Albuquerque, that part of the state, very liberal, very traditionally a liberal part of the state here. When this redistricting happened, I got to imagine from your perspective, you look and say, you know what? Now the district might be a little bit more balanced in terms of being actual more conservatives in my district. So I'm thinking for the Republicans, obviously you in particular here are probably thinking, you know what, this is probably a good thing for the overall in the state, because at the end of the day, we're getting a little bit more balance as far as who's representing us in D.C.
Absolutely. And I think that's what New Mexico has always lacked. It's always lacked balance. Right now, we just have one conservative representative in Congress, right? Everyone else, our two senators, our other two Congress people, they are far left, progressive, socialist, radical liberals. And we need a balance. And I believe that redistricting helped District 1 become more balanced.
Sure.
A lot of the conservative areas that I assumed in District 1 are now balancing out that liberal vote in the Bernalillo County area. So I'm excited.
Sure.
I'm very excited to be representing some of Chaves County for sure.
Well, and so I guess the trick now is, the people that may have kind of looked at your career and looked at what you've been doing at a passing glance, because we watch it from afar because we always want to see what the state does. But since we don't get a say per se in that election, we don't pay as much attention. So now that we get a say, Let's start with a little bit about you. I did a little bit of reading, and of course you have backgrounds in law enforcement, district attorneys. You have a pretty extensive background when it comes to serving the public.
I do. And that's what's led me to where I am today, wanting to continue to serve. I served 30 years as a commissioned policewoman. 20 of those years I spent with the Albuquerque Police Department. I started from the ground up in 1984, went through the police academy, threw on a uniform, a gun belt, my Kevlar vest, and hit the streets. For some reason, I did not pick the easy areas to work. Go ahead and laugh. I worked at the International District of Albuquerque, which is, well, I call it AKA the war zone.
Gotcha.
It was a tough district. I served 10 years on swing shift and graveyard shift there. I've pretty much seen it all,
Sure.
if you ask me. But I also took my career in a different direction. After 10 years, I decided to go into the detective bureau. And I worked property crimes and violent crimes, and ultimately ended up retiring out of crimes against children.
Okay.
That's where I spent my last 4 years.
Wow. And that's
so.
I'm just guessing that's probably the hardest stories of like dealings that you had to deal with. I'm guessing in all of your career is the crimes against the children part. I bet that was probably the roughest cases you dealt with.
Yeah, when you see a child injured or hurt,
Sure.
abused, sexually assaulted, it's not an easy pill to swallow. But I'll tell you, it brings out the fight in me. I guess I've always had this inner, I've got to find justice, right? And justice for a child is probably something that really motivates me for sure.
I get you. It's you want to fight for justice for people that can't fight for themselves.
Right.
There's that,
Right.
that mindset. And I think a lot of people that chose to serve in law enforcement probably have the same kind of inkling in their body. You know what I mean? It's just those type of people. That's what they do.
It's a calling. I have to say it's a calling. Not everybody can do it. I was a field training officer at one time and,
Sure.
Trained fellow officers. And it is a calling.
Sure.
You have to think a certain way. And
I'm guessing, too, it also gives you a unique perspective in, like a lot of your peers, counterparts in running for office, maybe the exact same one you're running for, they've had their own unique experiences and things that they bring to the table. But with your so many years in law enforcement, sitting in some of the worst parts of Albuquerque, coming across some people, you see the worst in people, but you also see the best in people in some of that. So I think you probably have a unique perspective in terms of compassion things. You see the stories, you see the people doing wrong, but you also hear the stories about why it's there. And so you can use that experience, I'm assuming in Congress when there's going to be legislation they're talking about on the House floor somewhere, you've got the unique perspective of, I know what the cops are going through, but I also know what the people are going through. And so that might be something that will serve you well as a representative, I would think.
I think so too, and that's why I'm running. I have a unique perspective because I've seen the world through a different set of eyes. The second part of my career, I spent 8 years with the New Mexico Attorney General's office, and I worked under the King administration. I grew up with Bruce King, being a part of my family, and then I ultimately ended up working for his son.
That's kind of New Mexico royalty, really, is the King family, obviously.
Well, they're a great family. My husband and I have 5 kids that we raised in New Mexico, and Bruce King knew all my kids' names. So he went to my police academy graduation.
Sure.
He was a good family friend, someone that we miss. But when I went to work for Gary, I actually worked 8 legislative sessions and was the liaison to the congressional delegation.
So you see a lot of the red tape side of being a representative legislator.
Right. That was eye-opening. I saw the perspective of how do I get Senator Bingaman and Senator Domenici to give me this money so I can take it back to our communities. And I worked on a lot of different issues. We got an anti-methamphetamine grant. We worked on border issues. We worked on money laundering issues. I like nothing better than going after drug cartels.
Sure.
Because they are poisoning our young people. They are poisoning our families. And we need to secure our border. Number one. And that is something that I think I will give a unique perspective to Washington,
Sure.
being that voice there of someone who's had that experience,
Sure.
and letting, other states don't have a border like we do.
Mm-hmm.
So they need to understand that unique perspective and understand why drugs are flowing into our country at alarming rates.
Sure.
I helped pass the very first human trafficking bill at our state legislature, worked with Susanna Martinez, on Katie's law.
Mm-hmm.
I toughened up our child predator laws. Got to work on all those issues. I feel so blessed that I was able to be a part of those pieces of legislation. But something that I wanted to share with you is, New Mexico has always had a reputation of being quite corrupt.
Mm-hmm.
I helped Gary King start the very first statewide government corruption division, hired our attorneys, hired our special agents, cross-trained and cross-commissioned our attorneys and special agents, because imagine that there's some laws on the books that we're not able to prosecute people
Sure.
when they're violating the law or embezzling taxpayer dollars. So, that was quite interesting working in his office. And
I just because of your unique perspective, and I know this is a vague, broad question, but from people on the outside looking in, I guess the question is, how screwed up is our legal system in this state? I mean, it seems like I think we all want the same thing. We don't want criminals. I mean, even you're hearing the liberals now starting to say, hey, we're going to be tough on crime too.
right.
We all agree this is a problem, but no one's like, well, what are we going to fix it? I mean, is it really that the courts are so backlogged? I mean, is it a cocktail of things that have got this messed up, or is there one thread that we can pull that unravels and kind of makes it all fall into place again?
Yeah, let's circle back to what I said earlier in the show. Your vote has consequences, folks.
Yeah.
And if you keep voting for liberal elected that don't deliver, then you're not going to get a crime bill at the
Sure.
state legislature. You're not going to have bills that are tough on crime and go after those violent offenders. I think one true thing right now, because of our revolving door, we need bond reform, number one. We need to educate our judges on this catch and release program is not working. You're releasing these criminals back onto the streets. We're having gun violence, shootings. I hate to say gun violence. Let's not put it in that perspective. Criminals are shooting people on our streets and killing people. And we've got to do something about it. How
Sure.
long? We can't just grow numb to this behavior of these people who should be incarcerated, should be serving time. It's time. It's
Sure.
time we, in reality, do get tough on crime
Sure.
and start putting some bad guys behind bars.
I do want to. I'm kind of curious. Obviously, this part we love our law enforcement. We love our blue. We back our blue. We
good.
have a great relationship with our police department and sheriff's department in this community. But nationwide, that's not always the case here. And you've worn the blue. You've done this. At a representative level, do you think they need to look at the way training's done in some things and maybe reevaluate how law enforcement is trained? Because I mean, every department wants to get better, and I know it's the training for law enforcement's constantly evolving. I know, whenever incidents happen, they're using that as lessons to teach officers and things. But do you think that maybe there is something at the training level they need to look at and address, or is it because I know a lot of it's, I'm one of those guys that watches the Live PD, the cops, all those shows, and I'm like, I always tell people, if you watched one of those traffic stops, and
Right.
because it really shows the officer's perspective. I think a lot less people would be a lot less defensive about why officers do what they do, because there's a reason for everything they do when they do it. But I guess my
Exactly.
question is do you think we need to, as law enforcement, they have to reassess how they do this? And obviously the public needs to be better educated on that relationship between law enforcement and the public.
Exactly. You know what I really love? I love citizens police academies. Are you familiar with those?
Vaguely, not a whole lot, but enough to know they exist.
I would love to take it nationally because, if one person went right along with a police officer, send them to one of those tougher areas. Let them ride along for an evening and see the life of a police officer, what they go through, how they're treated. Law enforcement has changed so much from when I was there. I was there from 1984 to 2003. We were able to do our job. Did we need extra training once in a while? Of course. One thing that I think a lot of people don't understand is law enforcement is constant training. We have management of effort training that we have to go through, and it's mandatory. Every year, twice a year, 3 times a year, firearms training. I mean, the amount of training that law enforcement officers go through is pretty immense when you look at it. And my feeling and perspective, I want to circle back to Albuquerque. We have had DOJ, a DOJ monitor in Albuquerque for almost 7 years now. Crime is up 63%. I think that is sending a loud and clear message that the federal model that the DOJ monitor is utilizing is not working.
Gotcha.
I would like to go to Washington to fight for a better model for law enforcement and be that voice for law enforcement officers to say, hey, look, this is the kind of model we should be using.
Sure.
This is how we should be training our officers. I'd like to work with the International Chiefs of Police, have them give us a perspective as well. They do a lot of policy.
Sure.
They do a lot of, standard operating procedures, policy. And it's sad at the end of the day to see law enforcement not treated properly across our nation. I really find that quite despicable. It's a tough job.
I'm kind of curious. I'm listening to you talking. It kind of a compare and contrast is. This reminds me of like BLM, and what I mean by that is, you look at BLM locally. You look at the people that see the dirt, work the dirt, know the dirt. They generally are in agreement. Even our local BLM. It's when they get back to D.C., people that have never been here, that don't, all they read is some reports about what's here, and then they make their decisions based on that, not knowing. It kind of sounds like law enforcement experiences some of that very same stuff. There's people in D.C. making policy, making edicts out there, and not really consulting the boots on the ground, the people that actually are day in, day out doing the job. Is that kind of what you're talking about a little bit?
A little bit.
Yeah.
You have to understand a law enforcement officer's job is very, very tough. You're dealing with the public on a regular basis. You're dealing with the public in crisis.
Yeah.
You're dealing with really tough situations. You're dealing with shoot, don't shoot situations. As a police officer, I just want to share my experience. I worked alongside a police officer who was arrested and sent to federal prison.
Wow.
Let me just tell you, as a woman that's worn the blue, a woman that's, walked the streets, worked, answered calls, been in different situations, been shot at, been kicked, been yelled at, cussed at, you know the routine.
You're not charming personality, didn't win him over on those.
Not on the first handcuffing. No, I did not.
That's a shame.
But none of us officers that enjoy the job, that like the job, want to serve the public, ever want to work alongside a bad police officer.
Because
let's just
they're
make
besmirching you.
Yeah,
absolutely.
They stain the badge is what I call it, and we don't want that happening. In any police department. It's just like any other profession, though. Are there good doctors and bad doctors? Yes. Any good lawyers, bad lawyers? Good people who work in government, bad people who work in government. It's the same thing. That's why policy is so important. That's why training is so important. This narrative that the far left is setting out there, defund police, that is the most ludicrous idea I've ever heard in my entire life.
I feel like they're backpedaling now a little bit on that one. Yeah,
they're moving towards the middle. It's an election year, Mike.
Yeah, imagine that, huh?
Imagine that.
Everybody's promising the world to.
They're moving to the middle. They're sending us checks and they're making us promises, right?
Yeah, and I think that the message is, and if I'm a Republican right now, I'm shooting out the message. I hear what they're saying right now. Remember what they did a year ago.
Right.
You hear what they're saying now. Remember what they did a year ago, and that's probably going to be the clear picture of what to expect
Exactly.
in another term under that
Yeah, if you
administration.
follow me
know?
on Facebook, I use the hashtag Remember in November. Just remember, their policies aren't working.
Yeah.
They're not delivering on their promises. MLG, I have the same name as Michelle Lujan Grisham, right? She has tainted my name. I'm the good Michelle. The good Michelle wants to go over there and be tougher
It's like the
on
Wizard
crime
of
folks.
Oz right here. We got the good.
She couldn't get us a crime bill during the legislature.
I know.
Look at that.
And people were screaming for one.
Right.
Like there was nobody not wanting one, and we couldn't get it done.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
It's just, we've got to get people in office that can get the job done. I'm one of those people.
Sure.
I obviously have a record of passing good legislation. I have a record of getting the job done. I have a record of going to Washington and bringing back millions of dollars and working collaboratively with both sides of the aisle. So hopefully, June 7th is election day.
Yeah,
so
we got
hopefully I can
primaries
get your vote.
just a
Yep.
little over a month away, month
Yep.
and change here.
But we need you to show up. That's kind of the problem that we've been having when we look at the data. Republicans are not showing up to vote.
Yeah.
And if y'all don't show up to vote, then we've got a problem.
Right.
And working from June to November, I'll be running against Melanie Stansberry. And if you really want Melanie Climate Change Stansberry representing you in Roswell, that's not going to be a good outlook for Roswell, in my opinion. That's what she's about. That is her priority. Climate change is, you go to her webpage, and I recommend you do.
Sure.
Because she is not one that is going to represent Roswell.
And I'm guessing probably more so now that your district has shifted a little bit, but I'm guessing you probably talked to some more oil and gas folks because obviously there's more of those in the district now.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And the thing that I always get that it's those companies work hand in hand with the government to meet to be honest, most of them go above and beyond the minimum government requirements. And
Absolutely.
things. And I think that's the part that gets lost in the mix is they want to paint the oil companies as bad guys and it's easy. We'll get Hollywood to do a movie and it'll be easy. But in reality, these people chew the same dirt. They live in the same. They don't want to tear up the environment. Their families live here too.
Exactly.
And so they do work with all this mess with prairie chickens and sand dune lizards and all the garbage we've been dealing with over the last decade or so. It's ridiculous. And that's what we're going to keep dealing with as long as we keep letting folks come run rush shop and tell us stuff that's not true.
Right,
Yeah.
right. That's the thing that we have to get across to those moderate Democrats, those people who, we need crossover votes to be able to win this seat. Now we need crossover votes to win all 3 seats, right? Because of redistricting. I have a record of getting a lot of crossover votes, and I also have a record of supporting the oil and gas industry. And I'll tell you, they paint a terrible picture of these people that work in the oil and gas industry. And I've actually been there. We got to keep our pump checks going.
Sure.
Come on, we're paying too much at the pump.
Oh, and by the way, China oil, the ones our president's saying go ahead and get oil from them. Do you think they're doing the environmental Greenpeace thing to get that oil out of the ground?
Not.
No, that oil that comes out here, I guarantee, was pumped a lot cleaner than whatever's coming out of China
Absolutely.
or Russia or wherever else.
You are 100% right, Mike. That's something that I always talk about because as a candidate, you do get asked the climate change question, right? You do get asked environmental questions. And to me, this is a global issue. Let's go after those bad actors who don't have regulations like we do here in the United States. We actually monitor our greenhouse gases. We monitor, methane, things like that. We are taking care of the issues. Whereas if you go to China, India, these other places, Venezuela, I think about it.
They probably laugh at you when you said, "There's a chicken here that you might hurt if you start drilling here."
Right,
they might laugh at you.
Exactly. There's a silvery minnow we have to protect. I totally get it. Exactly. It's.
I did want to ask one more question before we go.
Sure.
I'm running out of time and a little all over the place. But since I have a unique perspective here, I'm wondering, since you live Albuquerque, that's your neck of the woods here. Are you starting to see more Democrats come to you? And what I mean as more and more people get mad at the governor,
Right.
which is happening. I mean, even her staunchest people are like, all right, this is ridiculous. Are you starting to win hearts and minds of people that were, I'm not. I mean, the moderates, sure, but even some of the folks that were a little farther than the moderate. I mean, are they starting to realize that maybe they backed the wrong horse here, or and starting to talk to you? I'm just curious to see if that tide's turning a little bit up.
Right. It's so interesting you asked that because, part of the campaign, we have to go out and get petition signatures, right? Yeah. So we've been all over the district getting petition signatures, and that was earlier this year. And you don't ask people, you don't know their party affiliation right off the bat, right? But you learn their party affiliation because only Republicans can sign Republicans' petitions. Sure. So we met up with a lot of Democrats. I re-registered these people. I had a little QR code that I carried with me. So they were ready
to jump ship that day.
Exactly. And the message we heard was, I'm done with the Democratic Party. I think Joe Biden has been such a disaster. He's taken our America and it's circling the abyss right now. And if we don't start to make change this election cycle, we only need 5 seats to take that gavel out of Nancy Pelosi's hand.
Wow.
Think about it. 5 seats, 5 congressional seats, and we can have a conservative Speaker of the House. This is a crucial election year to change the direction of our country.
Sure.
It really is.
Absolutely.
So, I get all upset when I hear people say this might be the most important election of your lifetime.
Sure. Because we do that every election.
We do that every election.
We do that.
But it's like for real this time. This is, and in New Mexico, we've been saying it for a long time, but it was true. Every time we've said that, look what we've ended up with. We've ended up with bad Democratic elected that don't deliver on their promises.
Sure.
Right? They just don't deliver.
Nothing else. Give someone else a try. See, what
have you got
what's
to
the
lose?
worst going to happen? Going to get worse? That's kind of hard.
I believe it's going to get better. We've got no direction to go but up.
Sure. Right? Absolutely. So let me ask this before we let you go here. People listening, they want to get involved. I imagine now that you're kind of covering into some new territory here in Roswell, Chaves County, you could probably use some support here as far as, knocking doors and getting signs, all the boots on the ground work of a campaign.
Absolutely.
How can they get involved there?
Well, please go to my webpage.
Okay.
I have a webpage and you can look at me. I have a webpage and you can see my resume.
Okay.
I post my resume on there. And you can look at my platform as well. And it is at votemgh.com.
Very good.
Easy. It's my initials, Michelle Garcia Holmes, votemgh.com.
Very good. And come and learn more. And I know we'll see probably a bunch here between now.
Oh, sure.
And
sure.
And obviously, if you get the representative position, open forum, and hopefully we get to talk to you, once a month or two, just to kind of chit chat.
Absolutely.
We get to, I was talking, Congresswoman Yvette Harrell does that, and I'm kind of like, well, I guess we're going to have all 3 of you on at some point or another because we can get everybody covering here. So.
Yeah, and wouldn't it be nice just to have such a collaborative effort? If we can take District 1, 2, and 3 this year, imagine what New Mexico would start to look like.
Sure, maybe we can start actually turning around these 50s and 49s and all these categories
Absolutely.
we're in. See if we can get into at least the 30s. Well, thank you, man. We appreciate the visit, and good luck in the campaign, and we'll talk to you again soon, okay?